too short. All right. So about 4 years ago, I decided I was ready for a career change. I had been working in elite disability sport for about 12 to 15 years, and I loved it. It had given me the opportunity to travel around the world, lived in another country for a little while, and it was amazing. But then I got to the point where I was just burnt out, and I had enough. And I had always told myself that if I got to that point, that I didn't want to live for just paycheck to paycheck or live for the paycheck. So, I was like, okay, and it was a little scary, but I was like, I'm 43 years old. This is not the time that I thought that I was going to be still trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. But, I was ready to move on. So I did a lot of soul searching, did a lot of researching, a lot of crying, sitting in my bed with the covers over my head, and it finally came to me. I decided I wanted to be a funeral director. And while that might be a little bit off from what I was doing, I always had an interest in being a funeral director. But I was doing my thing in sport, and I was enjoying that. But the other little thing was that I was kind of freaked out by dead people. And so, but I had been to funerals and always had this vision that they were gonna like jump up out of the casket and attack me. But I knew in my heart that I really wanted to work with families and help them through that process. And so I was like, I don't have to have anything to do with dead bodies. I'm just going to work with the families. And so I convinced myself of this. And then I was like, okay, let me figure out what to do next. So I was living in England at the time, and so I was ready to also come back. So I was figuring out where I wanted to live. I wanted to kind of have a new start. So I had some friends here in Portland, and they had been telling me for a while, like, you should come to Portland. It's this queer mecca. You'll love it. And so I came out, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And I found a school. Mount Hood has a mortuary sciences program. So I came here and I started school, and get to school and quickly find out that you are going to have something to do with dead people, quite a bit to do, at least in the beginning, because you have to learn how to be a funeral director as well as an embalmer, and then when you're done, you can do one or the other or both, but you have to learn it in school. So I was like, all right, no problem, I can work this out. So I get through school, it's about 2 years, and I have to do an apprenticeship. In the state of Oregon, you have to do an apprenticeship before you're licensed. So I took a position at a place that was a little bit different than most of my classmates. So I worked for a place that served other funeral homes. So we primarily did removals, embalming, cremations, but we served other funeral homes versus the direct public. So this place, because we served all these people, we had a refrigeration system that's held 75 to 100 dead people at any given time. So, when I'd be in that cooler, I was always trying to figure out how to not have my back to dead people. But when there's on average 80 people in there, you have no choice. So that was kind of helping me get used to it. And so like I said, we did primarily removals. So we did kind of the weird stuff that nobody else, like other funeral homes were like, oh, call them, they'll do it. And it was weird stuff like, somebody's died and they're stuck on a toilet. They're off in the woods somewhere. We also worked for the medical examiner, so we had homicides, suicides, just anything suspicious we were doing the removals for. So again, quickly helping me to get used to that. And then we also, most of the time, worked by ourselves. So we were taking these people to the other funeral homes, a lot of times at night. So we had this giant key ring with keys to every funeral home in this town. And and so you just don't have time to even think about it because we had so many calls and we were so busy, so you're in, out, and go. The other thing was the embalming. So by the end of the year, you had to embalm 35 people in order to be licensed. And so I had met people who struggled through that. They'd get to the end of the year and they barely had 35, and they tried to, they had to either work with other funeral homes or whatever to get that. I had 35 embalmings by the first 90 days I was at this place. And by the time I finished, I had well over 150 and probably removed 400 to 500 people in the year. So again, quickly got used. And I kind of ironically, for somebody who didn't want anything to do with dead people, I actually fell in love with embalming. The art of embalming. So I get to the end of the year, and it's time for me to start looking for a job. But I really wanted to live in Portland. I wanted to stay in Portland, and I was prepared to kind of just take my time and find the right place for me. And so there was a guy who was advertising, had been advertising at our place for looking for a funeral director, and I just ignored it. It was out in Hood River. So I ignored it, and my boss was like, hey, I think you should check this out. And I was like, first of all, so when I moved here, I'm originally from the East Coast. So I moved here, and I was like, oh, it's queer mecca. Everybody's so cool and welcoming. But then I was like, something's missing. And I couldn't figure out what it was for a while. And then I finally was like, where the hell are the black people in this town? And I'm like, where are the rest of the people of color? And I was like, this is definitely the least diverse place I've ever lived in my life. And then this guy's like, yeah, you should take a job in Hood River. And I was like, really? So he kept bugging me about it. And so finally I was like, you know what? I've been a student for 3 years. I'm broke. And I need, I can get some experience. And the guy was also looking, he was looking for a full-time position. He had a full-time position, but he was also looking for someone to cover his Thanksgiving and Christmas vacation. So I was like, oh, I'll go check out the vacation part. So I go meet with the guy, and he's immediately talking about the full-time position. I was like, yeah, well, I'm here for the part-time part. And he's like, well, I think you'd be a good fit here. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever, guy. So he goes, I said, well, let's get through the vacation part, and then we'll talk about it. So, and I'm thinking both vacations. So he comes back from Thanksgiving, and he's like, what do you think? I really, do you want to say, we really want you to be a part of this? And I was like, I kind of thought about it. I was like, you know what? I will go ahead and I can do anything for a year. It's going to give me a chance to get some experience, and I'll figure out what I want to do next. So, but before I moved here to be me, to be my authentic self. So I was like, I'm not going to move to this little town and be worried constantly that my boss is going to find out who I am, and then have to, be stressing the whole time. So I said to him, well, before you put this out here, I think you really need to know who I am and what you're getting into, and then let's talk about it again. So I said, first of all, I'm trans. And he kind of looks at me, and he's like, okay. And I said, I was born female. I'm now male. And he's like, okay. He kind of doesn't miss a beat. And I said, and I'm gay. And he's like, okay. And I was like, all right, well, you're looking at me, and the little bit of time that I've been here, are there like 5 black people in this whole town? So I'm like, how are your customers going to feel about that? And he goes, you know what? If they don't want to work with us because of you and who you are, he's like, then we don't want their business. I was like, wow, all right. He's giving some good answers. So I said, all right, well, one more thing. I'm in 6 months, I'm going to have surgery. It was going to be my top surgery. And I said, I'm not even going to be here for a year, and I'm going to be gone for a month, and then I'm not going to be able to lift for total 6 to 8 weeks. And I'm an embalmer. You have to lift. And he's like, no worries, we'll work it out. So I was like, all right. So I took the job. And it has been the most amazing experience. I absolutely love it. I've embraced the peace of working with the dead. I truly honor the fact that people trust me with their loved ones, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Now, it's Hood River, which is not a whole lot different from Portland. So yes, so I have awkward moments with people, absolutely. But overall, everyone's been very welcoming. I go into people's houses at like 2 and 3 in the morning, and out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm certainly aware of my surroundings at all times, and I'm always knocking on the door and just kind of waiting for that, like, hey, how are they going to react? But grief does a lot of things. It does a lot of weird things to people. So it's been great, and they've been accepting, and. Kind of not to sound cliche, but what it's made me realize is that, life is short. And I see death every day. Young people, old people, people who, been sick for a really long time, people who die suddenly and traumatically. And it's made me want to celebrate milestones in my life in a more meaningful way. And so sort of part of my reason in agreeing to do this was I absolutely hate talking in front of people. And this was an opportunity to sort of push that boundary to make that milestone memorable. So, 4 years ago, I made this huge career change. 4 years ago, I decided to transition, and both have been, better than I've ever expected that they were going to be. I've been licensed now for a year. And so kind of a side story was when I got licensed in 2015, I found out that I was the 4th African-American in the state of Oregon to be dually licensed, embalmer and a funeral director. And at first I was like, whoa, that's really cool. I want to tell people that. And then I was like, wait, that's fucked up. It's like 2015 and I'm the 4th one, but that's a whole nother story. But I appreciate you guys going through this journey and helping me celebrate this milestone, and thank you. I appreciate it.